So I was thinking the other day, what if Nate Bargatze was actually in my marriage? Like, picture it. Calm, slow-talking Nate, standing in my kitchen while chaos unfolds around him. And the first thing you notice is he wouldn't panic, not at all. He'd just kind of stare at my wife while I'm frantically trying to fix the toaster I accidentally broke 3 days ago. She's giving me that look. You know, the one that says, "Cannot believe you exist sometimes." And Nate would just nod like, "Yep, that seems about right." And the audience would already be laughing because he's not even raising his voice. He's just quietly acknowledging the absurdity, which somehow makes it 10 times funnier. And my wife, she doesn't yell. She doesn't scream. She just calmly lists everything I did wrong that morning while I'm standing there like a confused raccoon in the middle of a hardware store. Nate, he'd probably comment, "Well, at least he's trying," and then pause just long enough for everyone to feel the awkward tension. And that pause is the hook. Because in real life, nobody pauses that way. In comedy, it's everything. You can hear the audience leaning in, waiting for the next disaster. So then, she asked me to help with something simple, like putting away laundry. I start folding towels, but not like a normal person folds towels. I have my own system, by color, by size, whether the towel looks at me funny. And Nate's still there, just quietly observing, saying nothing. Silence do the heavy lifting. And suddenly, what should have been a 5-second task turns into a 10-minute episode of chaos. Towels go flying, socks disappear, I lose track of what I'm doing halfway through, and my wife says, "Why are you making that face?" And I say, "Nothing." I just stare at her like, "I don't know, it's Monday." And Nate would just nod again, that calm acknowledgement like, "This is marriage." And then it gets worse. Try to multitask, help with dishes, while also taking out the trash. But I can't do either. I drop a plate, almost trip over the trash can, and my wife calmly says, "You're making a bigger mess." And Nate would probably say something like, "Well, that's okay, he's consistent." And the audience is laughing because now you've got the visual of a man failing in every direction while someone else just watches and comments softly in the most hilarious way possible. The real hook, the part that keeps people watching, is how he would narrate every tiny detail without judgment. Every awkward pause, every confused look on my face, every towel that somehow ends up in the freezer, just calmly pointed out in that dry, slow voice. And the longer he stays quiet, the funnier it gets, because the audience knows the disaster is still building, still growing, and you're still right in the middle of it, oblivious. The crazy part is this story keeps escalating. I try to fix things. I try to help more. I try to show I'm learning, but every time I take a single step forward, something else falls apart. The more Nate observes, the more the audience sees it all coming. Then my wife looks at me like she's calculating how many mistakes I've made this week, and Nate would just calmly add, "Give it about 5 more minutes before it all goes sideways again." And right there, the tension hits the perfect comedic point because you know it's true. And I start thinking, maybe if Nate really was here, he'd quietly take over. But instead, he's just standing there, watching, commenting lightly, letting my failures narrate themselves, which somehow magically makes the whole thing even funnier than if he had actually done anything. And that's when I realize every time I try to adult, every time I try to help, every time I think I have control, the chaos is just waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And Nate, He's just there, calm, ready to point it out. And then when you start a comedy story with a calm observational opening, immediately establish trust with the audience and set the stage for every ridiculous thing that's about to happen. In the context of if Nate Bargatze was in my marriage, the calm observation comes from looking at the chaos around you without panicking, commenting on it in a slow, deliberate way, and letting the audience soak in the absurdity. The key here is that nothing in the opening is over the top or frantic. You're not yelling, running around, or flailing your arms. You're simply describing the situation in a matter-of-fact tone, which makes everything that follows even funnier because it's grounded. When you calmly note that your wife is calmly giving instructions while you are panicking internally, the audience instantly relates. They know that tension of living with someone who has their life together while you are fumbling through every simple task. That shared recognition becomes the first hook that locks them in. The calm observational opening also allows you to set up contrast. You describe yourself as this slightly confused, hapless person. You describe the world around you, your wife, the house, the toaster you accidentally broke, as operating under different rules you don't understand. The audience can see the difference, and the humor comes from their awareness of something you are oblivious to. This creates dramatic irony, which is a powerful comedic tool. They know disaster is on the horizon because they can see it from the outside while you are still acting like everything is perfectly manageable. Anticipation, the subtle, almost invisible setup, is the hook. Every small detail you describe in a calm, measured tone tells the audience something is going to go wrong. It's going to be spectacular. Another part of this opening is the way it establishes character voice. By observing calmly, you convey the personality of the narrator, the one who notices, thinks, and comments without exaggeration. In Nate-style comedy, the voice is soft, slow, and intentional. Every pause, every slight inflection, every understated comment matters. When you describe a moment like, "My wife gave me instructions while I stood there trying to remember what a toaster looks like," it's funny not because of the words themselves, but because the calm delivery makes the absurdity obvious. The audience can imagine the scene vividly. The slow motion panic on your part, contrasted with the serene confidence of your spouse, which makes every small action hilarious. The calm observational opening also serves to foreshadow escalation. You can hint at upcoming problems without ever saying, "This is going to get worse," simply by noting that you're holding the wrong object or slightly mishearing an instruction. You plant a seed in the audience's mind. They are subconsciously preparing for disaster while being entertained by your relaxed narration. The hook here is subtle but irresistible. They want to see how a simple, calm scenario will spiral out of control. And finally, this opening establishes pacing. By starting calm, the story can gradually escalate while keeping the audience engaged. The slow delivery lets the audience notice small details that will later explode into full-blown chaos. It's a quiet promise that the laughter will build, that the small observations you're making now are the foundation for bigger, more absurd moments. And while you're calmly observing, the audience is leaning in, already anticipating the next mishap, already hooked, already invested in seeing how far this calm facade can last before the inevitable chaos strikes. Self-deprecating humor is the backbone of Nate Bargatze's style because it allows the storyteller to admit faults openly while keeping the audience on your side, laughing with you instead of at you. In the context of if Nate Bargatze was in my marriage, the self-deprecation comes naturally because every small mistake or misunderstanding is framed calmly, without panic or exaggeration, yet fully exposed for comedic effect. You start by acknowledging your own limitations, like not being able to fold towels correctly, misplacing everyday items, or attempting to help your wife and immediately making the situation worse. By presenting these moments as uniflections rather than forced jokes, the audience instantly connects with you. They see themselves in your struggles, they recognize the chaos, and they begin anticipating the next blunder. That anticipation is the hook that keeps viewers engaged from one small mistake to the next. The power of self-deprecation lies in the way it blends humility and relatability. You don't just say, "I'm terrible at this." You illustrate it through your actions, accidentally putting socks in the freezer, knocking over a glass while trying to help, or forgetting what task you were assigned mid-conversation. Each failure is delivered in a calm, understated tone, which makes the absurdity even funnier. The audience doesn't need loud laughter cues or frantic movements to understand how badly things are going. They see the contrast between your intentions and your results, and that gap becomes a running comedic thread throughout the story. Every time you highlight another small mistake, it's another hook drawing the audience further into your world of well-meaning but chaotic attempts at adult life. Self-deprecation also works in tandem with observational humor, especially in marriage. Your wife is competent, organized, composed, and every misstep you make becomes funnier when measured against her calm precision. You might describe calmly how she reminded you of something that you completely forgot, or how she effortlessly navigated a situation that left you completely bewildered. Audience laughs because they recognize this dynamic in their own lives, and the humor grows as they predict your next blunder. Every small moment of failure not only entertains, but builds momentum, creating tension that the audience wants to see resolved, though they know it never really will be, at least not immediately. That tension, paired with gentle self-mockery, keeps viewers glued to the story. Another key aspect is timing and pacing. You tell a story in a self-deprecating way. You slow down to emphasize the details of your incompetence. Let the audience absorb the ridiculousness of each action without rushing to the punchline. For example, describing the precise moment you realized you were using the wrong tool for a simple task, smart, or how you confidently made a mistake that anyone else would have avoided gives the audience time to laugh, anticipate, relate simultaneously. Every pause, every understated comment becomes a mini hook that maintains engagement and keeps the story flowing. Finally, self-deprecating humor builds suspense because the audience knows your next move will likely be another mistake. They're drawn into your perspective, watching your calm narrative, while knowing disaster is just around the corner. Each small admission of incompetence sets up the next chaotic moment, creating a continuous thread of tension and comedy. As you calmly recount your failures, the audience is not only laughing, but becoming invested in what spectacular way you will trip next. Keeping them hooked and eager for the next scene, highlighting relationship contrast, is one of the most effective tools in Nate Bargatze style storytelling, because it naturally creates comedy without needing exaggerated setups or punchlines. A story like, if Nate Bargatze was in my marriage, the humor comes from showing the differences between your wife's composed, competent approach to daily life and your own bewildered, hapless attempts to navigate even the simplest tasks. The audience immediately recognizes this dynamic because everyone has experienced moments where one person seems to have everything under control while the other struggles to stay afloat. Calmly describe your wife moving through the house with purpose, folding laundry efficiently, managing multiple chores, reminding you of things you forgot 5 times already, while you're over here questioning basic logic, holding the wrong item, or staring blankly at a toaster you've accidentally broken. That stark contrast becomes a recurring source of humor that the audience anticipates and enjoys, and it also serves as a hook that keeps them invested. The beauty of relationship contrast humor is that it works on multiple levels. You're not just failing at tasks, you're failing in comparison to someone who seems effortlessly competent. This creates dramatic irony. The audience sees what's coming. They see how far behind you are. They can predict the inevitable small disasters before they happen. For example, your wife may calmly ask you to take out the trash, and you think, sure, got this, only to return holding something entirely unrelated, like a laundry basket full of socks. The audience is already laughing because they can see the mistake forming, and the contrast between her composed reaction and your confused explanation amplifies the comedy. Every interaction builds on this dynamic, and the calm observational style makes it feel authentic and relatable. The subtle reactions of your wife become another comedic device. She doesn't need to yell or overreact. A simple raised eyebrow, a quiet sigh, or a pointed glance is enough to convey judgment, patience, or mild disbelief. In Nate-style comedy, these understated responses act as silent punchlines that land perfectly when paired with your exaggerated inner chaos. You describe your own panic, confusion, or attempts to rationalize your actions while she maintains calm control. The audience is drawn into that tension. Every small observation, her rolling her eyes at a simple mistake, her quietly fixing what you accidentally broke, becomes a mini hook that keeps viewers watching because they want to see how the next contrast will play out. Relationship contrast also allows for continuous escalation. Every time you make a small error, your wife's calm competence highlights it even more, creating a rhythm where the stakes rise naturally. The audience is invested not just in your next mistake, but in the interplay between your incompetence and her efficiency. They anticipate the next collision of chaos and composure, which is exactly the hook that keeps them glued to the story. You may try to multitask, help with dinner, or fix something she pointed out, and the audience already knows disaster is approaching, but they watch eagerly to see the precise way it unfolds. Finally, the contrast humanizes both characters. Your wife's competence is admirable, and your confusion is relatable, which makes the story feel grounded while remaining hilarious. The humor isn't mean-spirited, it's observational, affectionate, deeply relatable. Each pause, each small misstep, each quiet sigh becomes a cue for laughter, anticipation, and engagement. The more you emphasize these contrasts with calm narration and understated reactions, the more the audience leans in, waiting for the next small disaster to perfectly highlight the differences, knowing that the chaos isn't done yet. Escalation of everyday chaos is one of the most effective techniques in Nate Bargatze style storytelling because it turns mundane, relatable situations into a slow, burning comedy of errors. If Nate Bargatze was in my marriage, the humor comes from taking small, ordinary tasks, folding laundry, putting away dishes, or taking out the trash, and showing how each minor misstep compounds into something bigger and funnier. It starts with a tiny mistake. Maybe you misplace a sock, spill a little water, or forget a simple instruction. On its own, the mistake seems minor, almost laughable, but when it's followed by another small error, and then another, the audience begins to see a pattern. They anticipate that each action is going to trigger a slightly bigger disaster, and that anticipation is the hook that keeps them engaged. You describe each small mishap calmly, in a tone that suggests, "This is fine," which contrasts hilariously with the mounting chaos, making the audience lean in to see what happens next. The key to escalation in Nate-style humor is subtlety. You don't need dramatic music, yelling, or physical comedy to make it work. You simply observe how things naturally get out of hand and describe them with understated, slow, deliberate commentary. For instance, you might explain that you were trying to help with the dishes, but accidentally mixed up the clean and dirty ones. While attempting to fix that, you knock over a pan. While retrieving the pan, you trip on a towel that had been misplaced earlier. Each step is small and realistic, but when described in sequence, it becomes a crescendo of ridiculousness that the audience can't help but watch unfold. The hooks are embedded in each tiny decision that seems inconsequential at first, and the audience knows that it will snowball into something bigger. Escalation also works because the audience begins predicting your next mistake. They see the first error, they see the second, mentally calculate what could possibly go wrong next. This creates tension and curiosity, which are critical to keeping viewers glued to the story. You can describe mundane actions like folding a towel incorrectly or forgetting to put the trash in the bin as though they are part of a slow motion disaster. The audience visualizes the domino effect before it even happens. That predictive engagement is a hook because they are invested in the outcome and can't wait to see exactly how the next step will fail. Another layer of escalation is your interactions with your spouse. Every small error becomes magnified when contrasted with her calm competence. You try to fix one mistake, and in the process, create another. You attempt to help, thinking you're improving, only to realize later that you've made everything worse. That dynamic, the well-meaning but hapless husband versus the composed, organized spouse, keeps the story moving forward while providing a constant source of humor. Each new escalation feels inevitable yet surprising, which is the hallmark of engaging storytelling. Finally, escalation allows for multiple hooks in one scene. Every new mistake, every slightly wrong action, every moment of realization that you are completely unprepared serves as a mini cliffhanger. The audience keeps leaning forward, expecting the next layer of chaos, knowing that it will come, but not exactly how. The story keeps building naturally. With each incremental failure, the comedy deepens, the tension rises, and viewers remain engaged, curious, and entertained, unable to look away as the dominoes continue to fall in slow, hilarious succession. Using a calm commentator or observer as a storytelling hook is one of the most effective tools in Nate Bargatze's style comedy, because it creates a layer of humor without ever needing loud reactions or exaggerated performances. If Nate Bargatze was in my marriage, the idea of having a Nate-style observer quietly watching your chaotic attempts at adulting introduces a slow, burning comedic tension. This observer doesn't intervene, doesn't yell, and doesn't panic. Instead, they notice the details, the missteps, the absurdity of your actions with quiet acknowledgement, pauses, and subtle commentary. The audience immediately understands that the observer sees what's happening far more clearly than the protagonist does. That recognition itself becomes a source of comedy. Every time you describe an action, like holding the wrong pan, misplacing socks, or confusing the laundry for dishes, the calm observer provides an invisible, steady presence, allowing viewers to laugh at the contrast between your chaos and the silent, almost approving acknowledgement of it. The power of a calm commentator lies in its ability to amplify small errors. You can describe a minor mistake, putting the wrong cup in the dishwasher in a straightforward tone, and the audience already anticipates the next disaster. The observer doesn't need to exaggerate. Their calm recognition is enough to make the moment funny. For example, you might explain, "I thought I was helping by putting the glasses away, and Nate just watched, tilting his head like, sure." That slight pause, that understated reaction, serves as a hook, giving the audience a moment to visualize the ridiculousness and anticipate the chain reaction that will follow. Every minor action you take, paired with the imagined calm commentary, becomes more hilarious because the audience feels like they are witnessing a real-time evaluation of your failures. Another key aspect is timing. The observer creates natural beats in the storytelling. When you describe fumbling through tasks, every pause for the observer's imagined commentary lets the audience digest the absurdity and builds suspense for what happens next. For instance, when you try to fold towels and inevitably drop one, imagining the observer calmly noting, "That didn't go as planned," stretches the comedic tension in a way that keeps viewers leaning in. These subtle pauses act as hooks because they encourage the audience to predict what will go wrong next while enjoying the quiet humor of being watched without judgment. The calm observer also serves to highlight the contrast between competence and chaos. Your wife is efficiently handling everything. You are failing at the simplest tasks, and Nate, or the imagined calm presence, is just absorbing it all. Audience enjoys seeing this dynamic from a third-party perspective because it magnifies the humor. Every time you misstep, the audience mentally inserts the observer's calm acknowledgement into the scene, making even small failures feel much funnier. Each moment becomes a mini cliffhanger as viewers anticipate how the observer would react to the next disaster. Finally, the calm commentator provides continuous hooks throughout the story. Unlike loud or dramatic humor, which spikes and then drops, the slow, understated presence of an observer allows for sustained engagement. The audience doesn't just laugh once. They keep watching, waiting for each subsequent failure, each subtle acknowledgement, each pause that heightens the anticipation of what's coming next. And as you calmly recount your misadventures, each imagined comment from the observer keeps the tension alive, the comedy growing, and the viewers glued to the story, waiting for the next quietly disastrous moment to unfold. Suspenseful or cliffhanger endings are a cornerstone of Nate Bargatze style storytelling because they keep the audience engaged long after a scene seems to reach its peak. If Nate Bargatze was, in my marriage, the idea of ending a scene or a story just before the ultimate disaster allows viewers to sit on the edge of their seats, imagining the chaos that's about to unfold. Instead of wrapping everything up neatly, smart, you pause at the moment where the tension is highest, the point where the audience can clearly see that something is about to go wrong, but hasn't happened yet. This approach works brilliantly because it leverages anticipation as the primary source of engagement. People are naturally curious. When you describe a scenario in calm, deliberate detail, while hinting at an impending mishap, the audience is mentally preparing for the next failure, leaning forward, and fully invested in what will happen next. The hooks are built into the very structure of the storytelling, keeping viewers from swiping or losing focus because they want to see the culmination of the chaos. A suspenseful ending also amplifies every small moment that came before it. Every misstep, misunderstanding, or minor disaster in the narrative suddenly gains more weight because the audience knows it's leading to something bigger. For instance, when you describe spilling a little water while trying to help with the dishes, forgetting which items are clean or dirty, or misplacing a towel, each small detail isn't just a funny anecdote, it's a building block that hints at the inevitable tipping point. The audience starts connecting the dots, imagining the domino effect that could unfold, and anticipation functions as a continuous hook. They are watching closely, not just for laughs, to see how the story escalates to the point of climax. Every pause, every understated description, every subtle sigh or glance in the narrative contributes to that mounting suspense, making the final moment even more compelling. The cliffhanger method also enhances relatability. In marriage, everyday situations rarely resolve perfectly. Small misunderstandings or minor mishaps often lead to bigger, unforeseen consequences. A story before the final disaster. You mirror real-life tension while keeping it humorous. The audience recognizes that feeling, the anticipation, the worry, the absurdity of knowing that one more small action could tip the balance into chaos, and they laugh because they have been there themselves. This shared experience strengthens the connection between the storyteller and the audience, deepening engagement and making the humor feel authentic. Another layer of suspense comes from pacing and timing. Style comedy relies on deliberate pauses and calm narration, which allows the audience to internalize each moment and anticipate the next. When you describe carefully how you're attempting to fix one minor mistake while creating another, then slow down the narration just before a major mishap, the tension rises naturally. The audience is fully aware of what's coming, and that awareness functions as a hook because it keeps them glued to the story, waiting to see the exact moment when things collapse. Finally, a suspenseful ending leaves room for imagination, which is a powerful comedic device. By not fully resolving the scene, the storyteller allows the audience to picture the worst possible outcome in their minds. Each viewer fills in the gaps with their own interpretation of how the chaos will unfold, making the humor more personal and engaging. The story hangs in that perfect balance of anticipation and absurdity, drawing viewers deeper into the narrative and keeping them hooked as they imagine what could happen next, all while laughing at the inevitability of the unfolding disaster. So, at the end of all this, my wife is standing there looking at me like she's trying to calculate how I've made it this far in life without setting the house on fire completely. I'm holding whatever random thing I grabbed by mistake, trying to act like I know what I'm doing, even though I'm pretty sure I just made 3 new problems. And she sighs that quiet sigh, the kind only someone married to a disaster-prone human can master, and says, "How do you function?" And I just shrug and say, "Honestly, I don't know. I think I just wake up and hope for the best." But that's marriage, right? She's the person who keeps the whole world together, and somehow she still trusts me to exist in it. And me have zero common sense, a remarkable ability to make ordinary tasks into full-blown adventures, the uncanny skill of finding new ways to fail every day. And somehow, against all evidence, we make it work. She has her competence, I have my confusion, and somehow the universe tolerates both of us living under the same roof. Every time I think I've finally figured it out, that's exactly when life taps me on the shoulder and reminds me I haven't even scratched the surface. And she just watches calmly, knowing that no matter what I try, the next ridiculous mistake is always right around the corner. And somehow, I love her for it. She loves me despite it. And that's the balance of life: chaos, patience, a little bit of comedy sprinkled in every single day.